Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first budget hearing of the season. We are going to start this afternoon with the Board of Public Works, and then we'll go to the Maryland School for the Deaf, and after that, the Maryland Stadium Authority. So we're going to start now with Andrew Gray, the budget analyst, and from the agency, John T. Gontram, Executive Director. And where's Andrew? Patrick, can you do it?
I haven't looked at it. If you move it to second, maybe it'll be easier. There could be a chance to wait.
You want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
We will change that and do the Maryland School for the Deaf.
I'm Laura Hyde, and I'm the budget analyst for Maryland School for the Deaf. Thank you, Madam Chair. And starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, in fiscal 2026, Maryland School for the Deaf's budget decreases by $300,000 or 0.5% to $55 million. Turning to page 2, MSD has a proposed deficiency of $2.4 million to replace to fund a replacement chiller for the Eli building on the Frederick campus, and DLS suggests that MSD comment on the schools covering those costs. Turning to page 3, Exhibit 1, the overview of agency spending, the majority of the fiscal 2026 proposed budget, $45.3 million, or 82%, is for salaries and fringe benefits. Contractual services total $2.4 million, or 5% of this budget, and contractual personnel total $2.3 million, or 4% of this budget. The remaining allowance totals $4.9 million, or 9%, for routine operating expenses. Turning to page 4, Exhibit 2, Enrollment. MSD's enrollment count for formula funding uses a 4-year average to mitigate sharp increases and decreases in their student population. For fiscal 2024, MSD's enrollment for formula funding was 414 students, but MSD estimates enrollment will increase over the next 2 years, with formula funding at 420 students in fiscal 2025 and 424 students in fiscal 2026. Turning to page 5, Exhibit 3, the proposed budget. From fiscal 2025 to 2026, the decrease of $292,726 is explained by the net increase of $2 million for personnel expenses, offset by the net decrease of $2.3 million in other changes, which includes the deficiency allocation for the chiller replacement. Turning to page 6, the Budget and Reconciliation Financing Act. Under Chapter 55, per pupil funding in the state share of the foundation program increases by $437 from $8,789 in fiscal 2025 to $9,226 in fiscal 2026. The BRFA of 2025 includes a provision that would reduce the foundation program per pupil amount by $169 in fiscal 2026 from $9,226 to $9,057. Although the fiscal 2026 budget includes a contingent reduction to apply the lower per pupil amount to local education agency budgets, MSD's fiscal 2026 allowance is based on the full per pupil amount. If MSD were to be subject to the per pupil reduction, the difference would be approximately $650,000. DLS recommends reducing MSD's budget by that amount to align with the fiscal 2026 foundation per pupil amount as proposed in the BRFA. Turning to page 7, personnel data, MSD is authorized 372.5 regular positions and 29 contractual positions in the fiscal 2026 allowance, which is an increase of 10 regular positions from fiscal 2025. All 10 new positions are contractual conversions. MSD has 23 vacant positions as of the start of January 2024, with 16 vacancies above the budgeted turnover. MSD should comment on how it plans to spend vacancy savings in fiscal 2025 and 2026. Turning to page 8, Exhibit 4, Issue 1, MSD had 4 findings and 1 repeat finding in a 2024 audit. MSD has fully resolved 2 of the audit findings regarding procurement and is working to resolve the other 2 findings involving ASL interpreting services and a memorandum of agreement with the MSD Foundation. MSD should comment on the status of the school's efforts to remediate remaining audit concerns, particularly in regard to the outstanding issues with procurement and vendors for sign language interpreting services. Turning to page 11, Exhibit 5, Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. In response to committee narrative in the 2024 JCR, MSD submitted a report on KRA scores. MSD reported that the KRA might not be the most appropriate measure for MSD students because all the students are on individual education plans. Although the exhibit indicates that MSD student scores were higher before the pandemic, MSD reports that the KRA doesn't capture the complexity of interventions for their students and the differential instruction required. To solve this problem, MSD and the Maryland State Department of Education are working together on a new kindergarten readiness plan centered on the Child Outcome Survey, which assesses the developmental progress of students' positive social, economic, emotional skills, acquisition and use of knowledge, and use of appropriate behaviors. Key elements of this plan can be seen on page 13 in Exhibit 6. MSD should comment on the status of the school's kindergarten readiness plan and administration of a new KRA or readiness assessment for MSD students in fall 2025. Turning to page 15, Exhibit 7. This is MSD's Managing for Results measure on student graduation outcomes, which shows that MSD had a decline from fiscal 23 to 2024 in students headed to college and work. MSD should comment on the reason students who earned a high school diploma did not meet MFR graduation targets in fiscal 2024. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Great job.
Thank you.
Any questions for the analyst? Okay, welcome.
Hello and good morning, Chairperson Senator Nancy King and subcommittee members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. My name is John A. Serrano. I am the superintendent and agency head for the Maryland School for the Deaf. Joining me today is Ann Miller, who is our chief financial officer and our chief operating officer. I would like to begin by thanking Laura Hyde and her office staff for their collaboration and work on developing the legislative budget analysis, so thank you. While we have already submitted our written testimony in regards to the analysis, we wanted to discuss some key points and bring them to your attention. In our written response, we highlighted our progress to address many of our audit findings. We are committed to resolving the remaining issues. That includes the vendor use for our sign language interpreting services. We have developed a contract through our solicitation paperwork in EMA. So thanks to the collaboration for the State Procurement Office. In addition to response to the KRA, we are focused on increasing our teachers' ability through professional development and periodic evaluations. And that also includes implementing the new KRA for the next school year, by having training sessions that are provided by the Maryland Department of State Education next month. MSD does acknowledge that the proposed reduction based on the per pupil funding of $650,000, while that amount may seem minimal compared to the percentage of the overall budget, it does have a significant impact for our operations. We take pride in being financially responsible and serving as good stewards of our state resources and ensuring that our funds are allocated to meet the needs of our students. That includes supporting significant staff and maintaining two campuses across the state of Maryland. Our deaf and hard of hearing students population is no question unique and requires our staff and faculty to be highly qualified to communicate effectively with our students to provide equal access to language and learning. Any financial reduction will make a tangible impact through our campuses and impact our abilities to maintain this level of specialty support and instruction. Finally, we deeply appreciate the state's ongoing commitment to supporting MSD's mission, which is to provide academic and social opportunities and to empower deaf and hard of hearing students throughout the state of Maryland so that they're able to reach their full potential and give back to our communities. MSD is unique as a school. We're able to provide full access in a signed environment where students are able to thrive academically and linguistically. In conclusion, while MSD agrees with most of the recommendations, MSD respectfully requests to carefully reconsider that $650,000 reduction. Thank you for your considerations and continuing supporting our mission. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions? I think we're good. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to BPW next. Andrew, I'll get you out of here as fast as I can.
Madam Chair, I apologize.
No problem.
Madam Chair and the committee, thank you very much. Page 1, Board of Public Works Fiscal 2026 Budget Analysis reflects there that the Board of Public Works is comprised of the State Treasurer, the Governor, and the Controller, and they have activities related to bond sale timing, also approving leases and contracts, and they have wetland issuance purview as well. On the bottom of page 1 there, the budget increases by around $800,000 or 2.4% to $33.7 million. On page 2, just note quickly, the contingent fund, one of the components of the agency's budget, has a $2.5 million appropriation for fiscal 2024. 1.5 million of that was reverted. So it's an increase of the appropriation from $500,000 to $2.5 million. They reverted $1.5 million. That's going to come up as a recommendation for DLS in terms of a $1 million reduction seems to be prudent, or a $1.5 million reduction seems to be prudent because they reverted 2024 money in that amount and because they haven't actually used any of that amount in 2025.
Okay.
In terms of the implementation of legislative priorities, Exhibit 2 on page 3, you'll note there that all the funding is being distributed, all the organizations have been recognized, agreed to, and it's just a matter of quarterly funding going out, and therefore quarterly funding will be continued throughout the rest of the year. So fiscal 2024 and 2025 projects will receive all their funding. Fiscal 2025 actions on page 4, there's a $2.5 million reduction in Board of Public Works in fiscal 2024 for the funding that goes to tree planting by the Chesapeake Bay Trust. There's a proposed deficiency that replaces that remaining $7.5 million. And then for fiscal 2026, all $10 million will be in special funds. So in 2025, it goes from 10 million to 7.5, gets replaced with special funds, and then completely replaced with special funds in fiscal 2026. Therefore, saving $7.5 or $10 million in fiscal 2025 overall, and $10 million in fiscal 2026 for that purpose. The overview of the agency's spending is on page 5, mostly Chesapeake Bay Trust, payments to erroneously confined individuals, and the Maryland Zoo. The budget is reflected on page 6. The largest increases are for payments to erroneously confined individuals and that $2.5 million increase for the Chesapeake Bay Trust mandated funding. That's because, once again, there's a deficient or proposed the deficiency in fiscal 2025, or BPW items, excuse me, that reduced by 2.5 million, that bounces back. So there's a $2.5 million increase there. Personnel data does not change. There are zero change positions in page 7 for fiscal 2026. Exhibit 5 reflects the first key observation concerning the Maryland Zoo. Attendance did go down between fiscal 23 and 24, and for fiscal 2025, it also appears to be down relative to the same time period last year. One of the things you've kind of noticed here is that it appears that members are more consistent year to year than the general public. General public fluctuates more often. Therefore, it seems important for the zoo to make sure that it kind of shores up its membership in order to be able to stabilize its overall attendance and revenues. Exhibit 6 on page 11 reflects information about the finances. You look all the way to the right, fiscal 2024, there's a $29 million in revenues, around $23 million in expenses, which is a good sign, obviously, to have your revenues exceed your expenses. However, we do note in Exhibit 7 on page 12 that it looks like still that the zoo is relying a lot on state and local government funding, and therefore that is a potential liability in the future should there be any need to curtail state or local government funding to support the zoo. The bottom, or the very top there of page 13, DLS recommends that the information provided to support these exhibits be continued to be provided. And in terms of the review of erroneous convictions, that starts on page 13. The BPW is authorized by statute to award compensation to individuals who have been erroneously convicted, sentenced, and confined if they have received from the governor a full pardon, stating that the individual's conviction was shown conclusively to be an error. Just note in the middle of page 14 that there was a provision in the BRFA, or Budget Reconciliation Act of 2021, that was proposed as introduced. It was not finally adopted by the General Assembly, but was proposed to share the payments for the erroneously confined individuals 50% with the local governments. So with the consideration of the state's fiscal situation, DLS recommends that the local government payment sharing provision for erroneously confined individuals be considered again in the fiscal BRFA of 2025. Exhibit 8 on page 15 reflects information about the erroneous conviction spending forecast. This reflects information as DLS understands it. In fiscal 27 is the last known payments that have to go out to individuals who are erroneously confined. Looking forward, we just estimate that around 4 new people would be kind of added each year, and their legal fees would be kind of accounted for as well. Therefore, you see a large decrease in the amount of payments for that purpose. However, there is potentially additional information that we're not considering. Therefore, DLS recommends the bottom page 15 that narrative be adopted, requesting the BPW and Office of Administrative Hearings submit additional data to help us understand that forecast for erroneously confined individuals. Then moving down to the next page, we have information about the operating budget recommendations. Recommended actions, the $1.5 million reduction for the contingent fund due to the consideration that $1.5 million reverted in fiscal 2024 and no money has been provided or needed in fiscal 2025. The 2 pieces of narrative concerning the Maryland Zoo and also the Office of Administrative Hearings and BPW information about confined individuals. Then finally, on the next page, we have the BRFA provision that would authorize the sharing of 50% with local governments in terms of those payments to erroneously convicted individuals. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you.
Chair, you had a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Andrew, that last part, the whole erroneous conviction thing, with like cost share with the locals, what are we talking about money wise? I didn't see that anywhere.
So based on our projections, it's not a large amount if we're assuming that only kind of going forward after fiscal 27, there are only about 4 people added each year. It looks like it's something like $4 million would be total.
Historical, like, average look.
Well, it's, well, actually, it's closer to 5 million, but it's, I think they were seeing kind of a large increase to fiscal 26 in terms of the amount of spending, around $9 million, but that's basically the peak. So it's
Right.
coming down from that.
And obviously, any given year it could fluctuate depending on
The, right,
what
the individuals
happens
are
right,
brought
going forward. So around about 9 million, and obviously then it would just be 4.5 then the state, 4.5 to the locals of the jurisdiction that the individual was convicted in. Is that what we're saying?
That would be the recommendation, yeah.
Okay. All right. Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Moving right along, we will have John Gontrup.
Morning, Senator Bailey, Senator Quarterman, John Gontrum on behalf of the Board of Public Works. Start by thanking Mr. Gray for the thorough analysis. As he said, once again this year, the board's budget can be separated into two categories. The first category can be considered pass-through funds. This category includes funding to named grantee organizations in the operating budget bill, and we have a number of representatives from those organizations here today that would like the opportunity to talk about the great work they do. This category of pass-through funds also includes the board's contingent fund and payments to erroneously incarcerated individuals under state finance and procurement, Article Section 10501. This category of pass-through funds in the board's budget comprises, as Mr. Gray's analysis notes, roughly 94% of the board's FY26 operating budget request. The remainder of the funds in the board's operating budget request are operational funding for the board's staff, mainly personnel expenses. I want to thank the committee for the consideration of the board's request, and I'm happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Committee, do we have any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Moving forward, we'll go down the list. Jana Davis. Oh, and if you hold on for 1 minute, we can go ahead and get some of the other people up there. Wesley Hines, Erica Anderson, and Nancy Hines. Ms. Davis, you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Quarterman, thank you so much for having us here today. And also thanks to the Board of Public Works for sort of hosting us in this pass-through capacity as part of your budget, John. Just a little bit of background about the Chesapeake Bay Trust. I think both of you know. We were created by you all, General Assembly in the 80s, without an appropriation for operating costs, but instead the Bay Plate and the tax checkoff, which supports the main operations. But we're very efficient. 92 cents of every dollar goes to programs. We have a very high Charity Navigator rating, highest for a couple of decades now. And so a couple of years ago, you all tapped us to manage programs in a sort of restricted capacity. The two before you today, the Urban Trees Program and the Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps, both have benefited your districts. The first program is the Tree Solutions Now Act created Urban Trees Program that, thank you so much for describing. This program supports urban tree plantings in urban underserved communities. We have more demand than we have funding available. So far, we've funded 123 awards for $25 million in award money, and the full list of those groups is in my written testimony. About 1,000 jobs have been created as a result of these programs with grantees, contractors, nurseries, et cetera. 74,000 trees to be planted or already planted. The program is open now with the funds that are slated for FY26. You heard that the funds did get cut back in FY25, so we cut back the grantees. These will be chosen so they're ready to hit the ground running in September. So thank you for consideration of full funding for this program. The second program is the Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps. This is a program for young people. Young people are placed in host organizations around the region. Stipend supported, we have 428 alums, and this $1.5 million expands that program. We have a great partnership with the new DSCI, Department of Service and Civic Innovation, so we can hopefully meet as much demand as possible. We're still going to have more demand than available slots for these young people. Again, these programs have benefited all of your districts. Senator Quarterman, your district has had urban trees grants, and Senator Bailey, your district has had Corps members, so it's wonderful. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to manage these funds for the state, and also again to John and BPW.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. We appreciate you allowing the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad to speak for a moment today. I'm Wesley Hines, the Executive Director and General Manager of the railroad. We just would like to highlight the efforts and the partnership that we enjoy through Executive Secretary Gontram's office, the Board of Public Works, and what we do out in Western Maryland with the railroad. The return on investment, typically, we have seen continued growth year over year since 2021 coming out of the pandemic. We were at about 47,000 passengers in 2021, and this year that we just wrapped up, we were over 80,000 passengers. And these funds also go towards building new jobs within our community. In 2021, we resuscitated the railroad with about 7 individuals, and now we're hovering just at around 35 individuals. And we've also been able to roll out programs within our organization that provide continuing education for our staff through programs with Frostburg State University and the Allegheny Mountain College. So we're very proud of how we've been able to bring more people into our organization and have them settle. Almost every one of these individuals has moved from outside the area, from other states, and moved into Maryland to make Maryland their home. So we're very proud of that. We're always looking at new and creative ways to highlight Western Maryland. This year, we were actually voted for a second time in a row as the #1 tourist destination in the region. So we're very proud of our accomplishments, and we just are proud to have this opportunity to say thank you to this committee for your efforts in helping the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad, and invite you all out at any time to take a ride aboard our trains. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, John Gontram, who's always helping us navigate this process. My name is Nancy Hines, and I am the CEO of the Signal 13 Foundation. And I want to thank all of you for your past support. Because of your grant, we are able to help Baltimore City Police with hardship grants and scholarships for their children. Since 2015, we have provided almost $600,000 in grants and $1.1 million in scholarships. As you may know, Signal 13 is a local independent nonprofit that supports Baltimore City Police, both sworn officers and civilians, with hardship grants if they are shot in the line of duty, injured in the line of duty, get sick, have a family emergency. And we also provide them with their children with college scholarships. So I submitted testimony, but I thought I would take this opportunity to quickly tell you about some of the accomplishments that we've been able to do in 2024. First of all, we increased scholarships for the first time ever for Signal 13, which is great. We have expanded our mission to include community outreach and partnerships so that we, Signal 13, can do more to help foster better relationships and stronger relationships between police and the community they serve. We provide 3 scholarships to boys in 4th and 7th grades in Baltimore City schools that are part of the Project Numa program. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They, too, are a nonprofit that brings these kids together with police cadets to really build on mutual trust and respect between them. And then finally, we've been able for the first time to implement a payroll deduction program within the police department that makes it easier for police officers and civilians to donate to Signal 13 and give back to an organization that supports them. And there are, I'm not sure of the exact number, I think there are probably 3,000 employees of the Baltimore City Police Department, and imagine if every one of them gives $5 a paycheck, the tremendous impact that would have. What's interesting about this is we had an officer, a sergeant at the time, who was shot running into a methadone clinic to save people from an active shooter. His name is Bill Shiflett, sergeant at the time. He is now a captain. That was in 2019. We gave him a lot of support as he recovered, and he gave back to us in a big way because he championed this payroll deduction program through City Hall, through the police department, got all the signatures that are necessary. He was so grateful to us for what we did, as all of our officers are. So now we owe Sergeant Shiflett, or Captain Shiflett now, for what he has done for us. So Signal 13 is often a last resort for many of these officers and civilians that come to us for help. In 2024, we helped a district commander who was severely injured in a car accident chasing a suspect. We helped a emergency dispatcher who has a very stressful job, as you can imagine, who is battling cancer. And we helped a emergency dispatcher who had a car accident at the same time that her husband was laid off from the Key Bridge collapse. So she needed help. And police officers do not like to ask for help, and every story is different. So I'll end by saying Signal 13 is very unique in what we do. The requests come from the officers themselves. It does not go through the police chief, which is how most foundations operate, and it's very personal for them, and it's very personal for us. So thank you for your support, and thank you for allowing us to provide support to the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department who risk their lives and who have very dangerous and stressful jobs. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Is there any questions, committee? All right, well, thank you all three, and we appreciate everything that you do for our communities, and that will conclude the hearing on the Board of Public Works.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, excuse me.
which representatives from the zoo signed up?
Well, I do not see them here, but absolutely have them come up, and we will give them a chance. By all means, we're ready, and I'm sorry if there was any confusion.
That's okay. Thank you so much. My name is Shannon Brown. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Development for the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. It's an honor to be here today on behalf of our organization and to personally thank you for your previous support and your consideration for fiscal support going into the new year. Our President, Kirby Fowler, regretfully could not be here today as he's attending the annual Directors Conference for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which is our governing body, but he wants me to express his sincere thanks and appreciation. He also did submit a written testimony. Our zoo is home to more than 150 animals, and we serve Maryland residents by providing access to the living world in hopes of fostering empathy for our planet and its remarkable inhabitants. We accomplish this through interpretive signage, keeper chats, animal education outposts, camps, and more. In fiscal year 24, we welcomed more than 380,000 visitors to our campus, 75,000 of which were field trip students visiting from almost every county in the state. Additionally, we participated in more than 30 conservation projects, including partnering several times with DNR to conduct wild black bear sow assessments in Western Maryland, and serving as a temporary home and providing medical care to an orphaned otter pup that was found neglected in Cecil County. We're eagerly looking ahead to this spring when we will break ground on a new habitat that will be the future home to a breeding pair of red pandas in hopes of bolstering that population. As demonstrated through our work, conservation and education are at the forefront of everything that we do, but our success would not be possible without the ongoing support of the state. So again, we sincerely thank you. Governor Moore recently included critical operating support for the zoo in the proposed fiscal year 26 budget, and we respectfully request consideration of that support, and I welcome the opportunity to address any questions.
Okay, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it, I think, for the Public Works, yes. So now we will go to the Stadium Authority. Thanks, Andrew.
The budget for the Maryland Stadium Authority hearing is on page 1. It starts with a description of what the budget is and what is in the budget. Stadium Authority is a pretty large and diverse organization. It basically does 4 different things. Its main things that it's doing right now. First is it operates things. For example, the stadiums that the Ravens and the Orioles play in. Also, it builds things. That would be school.
Now you are.
All right. Yeah, the Stadium Authority also, it builds things. Things that it builds are school construction projects and also the Legislative Services Building most recently. It finances things. This is an important part also because this is where the school construction and the stadiums get the capital money that they need for renovations and construction. And finally, there is a major sports entertainment events fund for which they provide grants for specific activities. On page 2, I'll go right into the budget itself. There is a $1.5 million proposed deficiency for the Stadium Authority. It relates to some activities around the Preakness. DLS is recommending against this deficiency appropriation. We note that there's a considerable sum has already been given to the Preakness, and we don't think this is a good time to add to that when we're having a difficult budget time. On page 3 is the pie chart that shows the different spending that the agency has. And in this case, there's some color coding to make it easier to understand. The blue part of the pie chart, that is non-budgeted funds that they spend on the things like the construction for school construction and their operations and things like that. The red part is the special funds, and that's the debt service that pays those are the finance costs that support those construction projects. There's also some $14 million of general funds for the Baltimore City and Ocean City Convention Centers that's included in there. There's some debt service and general funds as well. And the reimbursable funds are mostly Project Core. On pages 4 and 5 is a table that shows more detail about what I just talked about. I'll skip that, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Also, pages 6, 7, and 8 provide further detail in text describing the different programs and the different spending activities in the Stadium Authority. So then I will move on to page 9 to start with the key observations. The first has to do with Built to Learn. The third series of bonds was sold in 2024. And on page 10, you can see the results from the sale. On that table in Exhibit 3, what I would point out is there's a few lines that are, I think, most important in this. First, I'll start with the total available for the capital project. Basically, that's the money that you can use for Built to Learn. With this third one, $1.1 billion has been realized in bond proceeds for those projects. Second thing I want to point out is that this funding is limited to about $100 million of annual debt service. And so there is a ceiling to how much can be done, and it's based on the debt service. And so one of the issues then becomes, well, how much capacity do you have left? To date, the debt service payments are about $64 million, so there's another $36 million available. So there should be 1 or 2 more sales that will increase the total available for it. The third I want to point out is what the true interest cost is. That's essentially the debt service that's paid on the bonds. And the trend here has been unfavorable. In 2021, the bond sold at about 2.8%, 3.2% then in 2022, and in 2024, it's almost 4.3%. So as when you buy a house, if you're limited to how much you can spend in the monthly mortgage, if interest rates increase, then the total that you can afford is less. So I guess the question then becomes, what does this mean moving forward? And on page 11 is exhibit number 4, and that shows you what various levels of interest rates allow the state to finance and spend for Built to Learn. The blue bars on the bottom is essentially the money that's literally already in the bank. That's what's already been issued and is being used now to fund the construction that's happening now. The red on top there is how much we anticipate as interest rates change. So we went from about 3.5%, which is almost $1.8 billion, and if interest rates increase to 5.5%, that's down to about $1.6 billion. So we're pretty close to 4.5 right now. If interest rates remain the same, you're talking about a $1.7 billion program. Second issue has to do with the events fund that I mentioned earlier. The way that this is funded is 2 different ways. First of all, they get $10 million each year. And secondly, there is a replenishment that can happen during the year if they go below $10 million. And so what that means is this is a $10 million program, but it's actually even can't even be more than $10 million. Page 12, Exhibit 5, shows the grants that have been awarded since the program began in 2023. There's $7.5 million in the first year, $5.8 million then in 2024, and we're a little bit over $10 million is anticipated in 2025 and 2026. There's a couple of things going on with this program. First, it's quite large, and it was started at a time where the state had more money. So one of our issues and recommendations is to make this program a little bit smaller moving forward. So one of our BRFA recommendation for this agency is to two things. First, to reduce the annual amount to $5 million, and secondly, to remove replenishment. So they get $5 million each year to spend. A second issue that we have is that this program, if you look at it, it has a range of different kinds of activities that are funded. One of them, the Fair Hill, the 5-star event, receives about $3 million a year, and it seems to be an ongoing amount that's given to them. And so there's some. So the question is, what kind of a fund should this be? Should it be a fund that provides a lot of very large ongoing grants in perpetuity, or do you want a fund that is more like with the smaller things at the bottom that provides a larger, smaller but more diverse group of activities? And so our recommendation is to reduce the $2.5 million that is in Fair Hill and have them find funds from other programs and other ways to finance that, so that there are more of the smaller and more of the newer things can be done moving forward. Thirdly has to do with Oriole Park and the renovations that are going on there. Earlier this month, it's still January, there was a bond sale essentially to raise money for the first phase of the renovations. And what's interesting about it is really how it was structured. On page 14, there's the detail, which basically says they get $125 million has been raised. It shows the interest rates being a little bit under 5.7% that was paid. But I think what's most interesting about this is this was done as a private placement, not a traditional bond sale. And it was done through a bank. And the advantage of this approach is that it's very flexible. And also the bonds only are sold for, there's only 15 years the term of the bonds, and that coincides with the end of the lease. Now there are negotiations going on to extend that lease, and if those negotiations are successful and the lease is extended, this private placement approach makes it much easier for the Stadium Authority to issue new bonds and fold these bonds into a larger other issuance. And I think that's the advantage essentially for this approach. It looks like the interest rates are, though competitive, are a little bit higher than other recent sales have been for the Stadium Authority, but I sense that the Stadium Authority anticipates and is planning on extending the lease and refinancing those. That's speculation, but it seems quite logical to me from the structure of the sale. On page 15 are the recommendations. Most of them we've already talked about. The first one is, I have not mentioned though, the Stadium Authority gets $59.5 million in the allowance in fiscal 2026. When I checked it and added it all up, I see that $59.25 million is the required amount at this time. So this is kind of like, going into the couch and between the cushions and finding what you can. And in this case, it's $250,000, so we're going to recommend a $250,000 reduction that still gives them enough for the bond debt service payment. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a $2.5 million reduction for 5-star at Fair Hill and a $1.5 million reduction recommended for the deficiency. DLS notes that all of these, although they're special funds, they are lottery funds. So when lottery funds that are not spent fall into the general fund. So this does address the general fund shortfall that the state has. As page 16 has the BRFA recommendation that I mentioned earlier. This would reduce the program from $10 million to $5 million and remove the replenishment. And last thing I want to say, it has to do with page 17 and 18. There is a table here that just shows all of the different bond programs that the stadium is authorized to issue. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks and take questions.
Thank you, Patrick. You always do a great job. Any comments, questions for Patrick? Okay, then why don't we have Michael Friends come up to the table. Bring anyone else that you'd like to bring. Welcome. Want to introduce your team with you?
Absolutely, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Michael Friends, Executive Director of the Maryland Stadium Authority. And with me today on the far left is Phil Hudson, who oversees capital planning and construction on the Camden Yards complex. Gary McGuigan, who oversees our capital projects and development group. Terry Hasseltine, who oversees the Maryland Sports Commission and is also involved with the Sport and Entertainment Corporation of Maryland. And to my right, excuse me, is Don Absher, our CFO. Our chair, Craig Thompson, wanted me to express his what's the word I'm searching for? He can't be here today. We'd also like to thank Patrick Frank for his insightful report and the ease with which we work with him. We're pleased to be here to discuss the issues contained in the report and answer any questions. We prepared written materials that you should have in your meeting books. And with that, Don will address the debt service issue. Terry will address the other three issues because they fall within his area of responsibility. And then finally, Gary McGuigan will address a funding issue that's come up with this specific project. So, Don?
Good afternoon, thank you. MSA believes the debt service amount should remain at 59.5. Sorry. MSA recommends the debt service amount should remain at 59.5 due to one of the bond issues is a variable rate, the football 23B, and that allows a little bit of flexibility for rising interest rates if they occur. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I don't see any.
Well, thank you, members of the committee and Chairwoman King, for the opportunity to discuss the Major Events Fund and the recommendations being made. I'll first start with the $1.5 million that's being recommended. That's actually allocated in this fiscal year's budget. It is a non-direct correlation with the Preakness Stakes. It is actually the creation and development of a sustainable annual campaign to help elevate the business sector and the tourism sector in and around Maryland's largest sporting event, the Preakness Stakes. The project and the construction and those things are being handled through other means and other opportunities. This is an initiative that is being spearheaded by the First Lady in trying to capitalize more revenues through this event to ensure that we have a sustainable long-term festival that is not just about Baltimore City, however, about the state of Maryland and how we celebrate the equestrian industry and also create new revenues for the state through the Preakness Stakes in years to come. And obviously, as we transition from the current ownership structure to the new ownership structure come 152, making sure that we're ready as the state to receive the responsibilities of that event and that activity, that we create multiple days of activities that generate room nights, generate small business and small procurement opportunities, employ more personnel and the like. And so we do know that that fund is a one-time offering of 1.5 that is in this year's fiscal budget. As it pertains to the recommendation of cutting the fund back, it's duly noted that in our testimony, and you'll see in writing, is that the sports tourism industry has been really regarded as a recession-proof industry. The resiliency of the market is pretty substantial. If you look at any downturn in the state's economy, the nation's economy coming up 9/11, sports tourism was the first to recover, coming after the downward turn of the economy in 08, 09. Sports tourism was the first industry to recover, and coming off of the pandemic that we just went through was the first to recover. So we think right now is the time to be doubling down on sports tourism and actually increasing and embed more funds into that account because it is economic driving opportunity. It is bringing more people to the state, and it is driving dollars into the economy and not taking out of the economy, where right now it's a $10 million fund. And that fund is based on each fiscal year. The replenishment actually occurs in the following year. For example, if we use $5 million this year, next year you have to replenish it with $5 million to bring it back up to 10. It's not a mid-year replenishment. The reason it might come across it that way at this current time is the fact it's a new program. It's only in its third year, and obviously we created policies and procedures and transparent distribution of how these funds are used. And to conclude on the last piece, which is the Maryland 5-Star. The Maryland 5-Star was an event that was pursued on, with the state of Maryland, along with our partners up in Cecil County, to bring the 5-Star, which is only one of 7 in the world and only 2 in North America, to Maryland to support the equestrian industry and the growth of that industry. And it got hit by the pandemic. I mean, we were just getting rolling with starting to execute that event. Then the pandemic hit. But we had a responsibility coming out of the pandemic to still deliver that event at a world-class manner and at the expectations of excellence that the state would require. Therefore, the funds that you see are diminishing over time, but it required us to have a far more substantial investment early on to make sure that the investment of the state in that bid process, as well as the property up at the special event zone, had that event to lean on. And also, it's helping generate significant revenues in the northeast quadrant of our state. Last year, the event did $11.6 million in direct spend on Maryland's economy, did $19.9 million in direct business spend, and generated over 17,000 hotel room nights in the northeast quadrant of our state during a 4-day window of time. So the event is continuing to grow to create revenue on behalf of the state, and we look forward to that event to continue and becoming a tentpole event in the state of Maryland for many, many years to come. And I will answer any questions that are proposed.
Thank you. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you. Quick question again. I appreciate the information. In regards to that 10 million, I'm just curious, in reduction to 5 million, can you give me some examples, I guess, what that fund has been used for? Is it operating money? Is it for, what exactly is it for? Exactly. Is it for advertising for the events? I mean,
it's a combination of all the things that you're listing. It's not 100% of the budgets of those events by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, it doesn't exceed, in most cases, anything greater than 20% of the totality of the budget. It's to help us secure in a very competitive market where these events can go anywhere in the United States or even in some cases the world. Mm-hmm. It helps us to compete to secure those events. It also helps us to create some of the general operating capital to get them off the ground and launched. And then some of the events, because they're all different, some of it is to market and promote those events so that ticket buyers and others know that, and there's awareness of the events so that we can maximize sellouts. We can actually grow the portfolio of the brand and the image of the state of Maryland through sports tourism. So it's a culmination of all the things that you listed, mm-hmm. but there's no one set answer to each event.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Benson.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. Could you kind of walk me through the process of how money is requested through the Stadium Authority? And also the second part, are there any areas or are any projects that you cannot fund or you're unwilling to fund? In other words, is there anything written that says these projects we cannot fund because of X, Y, and Z? I mean, walk me through that for a minute, please.
Are you talking about the Stadium Authority in general on everything from school in it, or are you talking about the grant program?
In general.
In general.
Well, in general, our funds are for projects that have been requested either through the chief executive of a state entity or a municipality or the head of an agency.
Just a little bit, please.
Say again?
I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. When we find, well, we work on projects at the request of the chief executive of a municipality, the mayor, for example, county executive, or through the head of a Maryland state agency. When it comes to financing, it comes through a change in our charter that allows us to finance. So these are projects that have, they're sort of the culmination of studies and studies relating to the market acceptance of the program, the cost of the program, and then the final culmination is financing. but it's all done at the request of either an agency or a municipality. I don't know, Gary, do you want to add to that answer?
Yeah, just quickly, the Stadium Authority does not go out and seek projects. So there's two ways we can get a project. One is by an act of the legislature, or two is the process that Mike just described.
I'm thinking about the blue line in Prince George's County. You know, that blue line comes down.
Senator Benson, can you
supposedly,
speak into your microphone, please?
as an example? I'm sorry.
I need to be able to hear you.
Oh. I'm thinking about the blue line in particular, you know, the $400 million. And it was supposed to come down Central Avenue into to the district line. It is my understanding that at this point in time, there's some hiccups relative to it coming all the way down into the area that really needs the money the most, and that is in Capitol Heights and Sea Pleasant. What's the process? It says we can't fund this, or you all don't have that authority.
Gary, do you want to answer this question?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, the legislature authorized the Stadium Authority to issue up to $400 million in bonds for the Blue Line. Currently, we have one active project for about $8 million, the Wayne Curry Plaza. We have an MOU with the county. The county establishes what it is they would like built within the parameters of the law that was passed. And the Stadium Authority is the execution arm that delivers the projects. So right now it's the county's prerogative as to where the money is spent.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gary, do you want to address the funding issue that I referred to earlier?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Just wanted to give an update on the 4 to 400 initiative, which is a programming and preliminary design study down in historic St. Mary's. Last year, there were 3 grants that were put towards this initiative, totaling $250,000. And the grants were worded that the funds were to come to the Stadium Authority. We've actually been looking for those funds, and we actually found them 2 days ago. The funds were transferred to DGS, and we are working with DBM to see if we can get the funds directly transferred to the Stadium Authority. Also, we are starting procurement today, Senator, for the design services. It will take 3.5 to 4 months to complete. And I would ask, if you're okay with this, that we have a couple weeks to try and track down these funds and get the funds the way the legislature had authorized them from the state to the Stadium Authority. Happy to answer any questions.
Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate what everybody's doing. I have to say, yesterday in my office, when you walked in and said, we don't have the money, we're trying to locate it, DGS has it. After we went through this process a year ago, we've been setting up meetings with historic St. Mary's City. This is something that affects the history and the entire state. This is very important. We need your expertise, and we need your help moving this project forward. And I will have to say, it was like somebody hit me, right in the face yesterday when you walked in and said, wasn't happy about it. I'm not sure that you realized that, but you probably did. So the fact that money, I think it was spelled out pretty clearly how it got to DGS, That's obviously something internally that we need to figure out how that happened. But would like to be, kept on the forefront of this because it does directly affect my area and the fact that it affects my constituents, and then we build on all 23 other jurisdictions so we can work with this. Time is becoming of the essence, even though it's years down the road. It's a lot to put together. And these commissioners that we report to are awaiting this, right? And I have reported to them that we're working on this. And so clearly we weren't. I am just hopeful that you could keep me in the loop and we can move with this as expeditious as possible.
Thank you, Senator. It is an unfortunate situation, and we understand the importance, and you'll definitely be in the loop in the next few weeks as we track down the funds. Appreciate it.
I think it's an unfortunate situation, and I had not heard anything about it as chair of the subcommittee, so I really appreciate it if you could keep me informed also so that we know what's happening. It's kind of interesting to get a surprise like that today. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On a lighter note, thank you. We celebrated, as you guys know, you were there, the opening of Meredith Park this year. 175,000 visitors we had. It has far exceeded the goals and expectations of everyone in our community. I just wanted to thank you again for the partnership over the last several years. And then even closer to home, the DLS building. I mean, I know that wasn't mentioned earlier. I think that we've all been over there recently. But I know from our part of the state, we appreciate everything you guys have done. It's great working with you guys and appreciate the continued partnership. We had Washington County Day on Wednesday and handed out little replicas of the stadium that were a big hit around the General Assembly. I hope you got one, Madam Chair. We'll make sure we get you guys one too. But thank you again. We appreciate all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have occasion to go up there this summer, and Senator Quarterman was quite a great host for up there, and it's a great stadium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have a witness here. Do you want to come forward? Matt Libber?
No more also. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. My name is Matt Libber. Bear with me, I have a bunch of people I'm representing today. My day job is the Executive Director of the Maryland Soccerplex in your beloved Montgomery County. But I also represent the Sport and Entertainment Corporation as the treasurer. I'm the vice chair of the Sports Events and Tourism Association, which is our national trade association, and I'm also the legislative chair for the Maryland Tourism Coalition. I'm here to oppose the reductions in the major events funds. Tourism is a huge part of the Maryland economy. To give you some numbers overall, there were 45.1 million visitors to the state of Maryland in 2023. They spent $20.4 billion in our state. That was $2.4 billion in taxes collected. That saves Maryland taxpayers about $1,000 a year, and we employ about 190,000 people in the industry. We're the 10th largest private sector in the state. The major events funds is part of the greater perspective and plan for tourism in the state of Maryland. So it's an integral part of getting people into our state to spend money that is from somewhere else here so we can spend it on state projects and public safety and things like that. So it's important that we keep this fund going because we're in a super competitive market. To give you some other numbers, the state of Tennessee has a similar fund that has $25 million in it. Pennsylvania just started a fund last year. They already allocated $5 million out of that, and they're expecting $240 million back in economic return. Just yesterday, the state of Virginia's Senate passed 40-0 a fund to create on their side. So the surrounding states are coming after the events that we're getting. It's a super competitive market. So if we don't keep this money, it makes us less competitive to get these events here. Something I brought up yesterday in front of the House is think of the Army-Navy game. So that was the only
only college football game played on that day. So the eyes of the country that love college football, we're looking at Maryland. So they're seeing what the state's about. That drove a lot of people to our state. So that's an opportunity to get people to see what Maryland is and drive them here for other events. This also means that people are coming to the state to spend money in hotels, restaurants, retail shops, the airport, rental cars. All this money is coming in from somewhere else. So this is money that Marylanders aren't having to spend. So it's important that we keep this fund going. The governor's budget is all about economic development, and sports tourism is economic development. This is getting people here and spending money. So I asked the subcommittee to keep this money in the budget, and if can, add some money to it. Because like Mr. Hasseltine said, this is a market that is recession-proof. People are always going to go to sporting events. They're going to spend money on their kids to play in events. You know, Chairwoman, you see what the Soccerplex does in Montgomery County. So it is important to our state that we keep this, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, any questions? Thank you. Thanks for coming down. Appreciate it. Okay, folks, I think that ends our hearing for today, and I will see you on Monday.